Hi, welcome back to Happy Apple Core Homestead. Today we are going to make plum jelly, but we're going to make it with honey instead of regular table sugar. So you will want to have a package of Pomona's pectin on hand. Other than the Pomona's pectin, you're going to need plum juice, lemon juice, or lime juice if that's what you have, and honey. And the first step is to mix up the calcium water. The calcium comes with the pectin. So we'll need a half a teaspoon and a half a cup of water. Now that the calcium water is done, we're going to start measuring out our other ingredients. And for this batch, I'm doing a combination of jelly jars and half pints and enough to fill my canner. And so it's going to be 14 cups of the plum juice. All right, so we've got 14 cups in the pot. I'm gonna clean up and we'll go on to the next ingredient. Next ingredient is lemon juice. And we'll need 3/4 of a cup plus 2 tablespoons. Wow. Next, we are going to add 14 teaspoons of the calcium water right into the pot. And it's still kind of floating down to the bottom, so I'm just going to stir it as I go. All right, we'll give that a stir and we'll move on to the next step. Now we're going to grab a separate bowl and measure out our honey. And for this recipe, we need 3½ cups. Now it's time to add the pectin right into the honey. And we'll be using 14 teaspoons. Now we'll give that a nice good stir. This is halfway stirred up, but it's going to take me a little bit. So while we're doing this, why don't we go ahead and put the juice mixture over on the stove, because it has to come to a boil before we can put the honey in. I'm going to do that and then we'll get back to stirring. Now that this is really well incorporated, why don't you meet me back over at the stove and we'll go on to the next step. The juice is boiling and I don't want it to foam up, so I've got the temperature turned down pretty far. This burner has a mind of its own. Not a brilliant mind either. All right, gonna get a different utensil and then we're gonna put the pectin and honey mixture into the pan and stir vigorously. Hopefully I don't drop it. It's not heavy per se, but it's a little slick. We're going to turn the heat back up and we're going to want to give this a nice good stir continuously until it starts to boil again. Once it comes to a boil, we'll take it off the heat. And the jelly is boiling now and starting to develop some foam on top. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat off and I'm going to remove this from the burner. Now this would be the time, if you wanted to remove the foam from the top, you would go ahead and do that now, because the next step is to fill the jelly jars. I got most of the foam removed, and so now we're just going to fill the jars. I will use a funnel, and you just pour it right in, and you're going to want to leave 1/4 of an inch of headspace at the top. So right about there, looks pretty good. Just going to eyeball it. And if you want, you can take your bubble popper and just kind of swirl it around in there. I don't really know how necessary it is for jelly. I certainly don't, I don't do that when I'm canning juices, and they've always turned out great. But you do want to wipe the rim. I'm just using a wet paper towel for that. And you'll grab your clean lid and your ring. And then you're just going to want to put it on finger tight, so don't wrench it down. It's pretty hot, so you might need to get your oven mitts out. But there we go. Party, huh? I'm going to fill all these jars, and for now I'm just going to set them aside. And once they're all full, I'm going to come back to you and show you the canning step, which will make these shelf stable. I will be back in just a little bit. All of the jars are full, and now it is time to fill the canner. I'm using a pressure canner, but I'm going to use it as a water bath. So I do have a rack down there in the bottom. And let's just go ahead and start filling. Let's see how. Make sure I don't burn myself. So we fit 8 wide mouth half pints in the bottom. And then we're going to put a second rack on. So I have this, it's not dirty, it's just discolored from all the minerals in our water. And you're just going to set that right on top. And then we're going to put these smaller jars right on there, kind of not like exactly straight in the middle of the other jars, but just kind of kitty corner. And the water for this has to be 1 to 2 inches above the top of the jars, even the ones on the top layer. I have room for 1 more, so I'm gonna get that and then we'll move on to the next step. I got 1 more jar here. I kind of feel like maybe 1 more would fit in there, but I think we're just gonna stick with this. And I'm just gonna put a little bit more water in the top. So let's just go ahead and crank this temperature up and put it all the way on high. And I'm going to pop a lid on there. All right, when this gets to a full rolling boil, I'll show you what it looks like, and then we will start our 10-minute timer. The water is at a full rolling boil. I'm going to pop the lid back on and set my timer for 10 minutes. After that time is up, I will see you back for the next step. Okay. We're going to take the pot off the heat. Careful because it's heavy. And remove the lid. Use your mitts. And we're going to set a timer for 5 minutes. Be right back. The 5-minute timer has gone off, and now we're going to unload the canner. And we're going to set these jars on a cloth over here. And don't tip the jars when you lift them up. The water on the top will evaporate. And that's all there is to it, folks. I'm gonna go ahead and empty this canner, and I will be back with you tomorrow. You're gonna wanna let these sit for 12 to 24 hours. Don't touch them, don't fuss with them, don't poke them, don't prod them. Just leave them alone for 12 to 24 hours. I will see you tomorrow for the next and final step in making plum jelly. It has been 24 hours and we are going to move on to the very last step of the process. I got 28 jars, though from the last clip you saw, I did do a second batch. One of my jars didn't seal, and I just want to talk to you about what to do next. You're going to want to take your rings off of all of your jars and test to make sure that they sealed. Typically when they don't seal, the lid's just going to slide right off. It's going to be super obvious to you. I personally don't store my jars with the rings on anymore. Kind of in the early days I did, but now I don't. Either way, whether you store them on or off, you're gonna wanna take them off for this step, make 100% sure that they're sealed. Then you'll take a wet cloth and you'll clean on those little grooves where the ring is. Cleans any little rust spots off and any sticky spots from siphoning. Once you have a clean and dry jar, you'll want to label what you've made. It might seem like, oh, I'm totally gonna remember what this is in a year. Yeah, no, you won't. Especially if you make a couple things that look exactly the same, but you're like, oh, I really have a hankering for something particular. Anyway, I use dissolvable labels. I like them because they, obviously, they're dissolvable. They wash right off the jar. I put the name of what's in it. I made these with honey, so I put that on there so people know, or I know. I mean, I don't really use table sugar for my canning, but it's good to know. And then I put the date. You can put the date on your lids if you want to. Tons of people reuse their lids, even if they don't reuse them for canning, like actual like pressure canning or water bath canning. They use them for dry canning, like dry goods. So I no longer put the date on the lid. I put it on the label instead. And you guys, that's all there is to it. That was so easy, right? Okay, so I'm done for today. I have tons of more videos coming up. Lots of things I want to share with you. So hit that subscribe button. Leave me a comment if you want to. Can be like, hey, you did a good job, or hey girl, you need some work. Either way, I'm happy to hear it, happy to have the conversation with you, and I will see you next time. Bye!